this was a true religious conviction. It is problematic because true religious convictions are absolutely protected by the Charter, and by any liberal Western democracy protects the freedom of religion and the freedom to exercise and hold the beliefs that you hold true. And there's no doubt that this gentleman did hold them true and did very much believe that he was constrained from giving this oath by his true and deeply held religious beliefs. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Beneath the Law. Gavin, Tighe here. Stephen Thiele. How are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm still got my broken hand here from last time, but
it will heal.
It's not I'm not a southpaw, so it's not that bad. I can survive and thrive, and just kind of a pain in the
now is it broken or is it just ligament damage?
Ligament damage. So yeah, old guy. I've fallen and I can't get up. That's the problem. C'est la vie.
Well, you'll need one of those pendants that you need to wear around your neck.
Right now, I just bleat like a wounded goat.
So can I ask you, is that actually worse than a break?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. I don't really want to find out to compare. So, but if I do, I'll let you know the difference. But I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It's actually about a million times better than it was a week ago. So there you go. I'm hopeful that I will have a quick and speedy and complete recovery very, very shortly.
So please don't fall down and continue to hurt yourself.
Yeah, most people will be angry that I didn't break the ligaments in my tongue, so I never shut up. But unfortunately, it was my thumb. So my hitchhiking days are numbered, but yeah, my talking days are apparently not unlimited, as they say, other than the confines of the time limits on our podcast. So today we're going to talk about a very interesting aspect. I find this like almost existentially interesting. And it's
a fascinating case to be.
Well, it really,
when you think about it,
really,
at the end of the day,
is on so many levels. So I this really what maybe Stephen, you could give why don't you give the facts so that the factual sort of matrix of where this all comes about.
Yeah, so this podcast is about a Alberta Court of Appeal decision which declared a provision of the Legal Profession Act in Alberta that required members or required lawyers who wanted to become members of the Law Society of Alberta to take an oath of allegiance. And the Court of Appeal of Alberta declared that provision of no force or effect, or in other words, unconstitutional under the Charter. And this was a case brought by a lawyer who was and I'm probably going to butcher the name of it, an Amarjeet Sikh. And he basically said that he could not take this oath of allegiance because it was contrary to his religious values and beliefs and the confirmations that he made to his religion. And because he couldn't take that oath, he actually had to go to another province to become a lawyer, and he challenged the oath of allegiance as being unconstitutional because it violated his rights of freedom of religion. And the Court of Appeal agreed.
Yeah, so the oath of allegiance in question, as I understand it, was I blankety blank swear I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors according to law. Now, in the Canadian context, we very much have an oath of allegiance to the Crown, and the Crown is a concept very much like the state. So when you'll hear in the United States when people say I'm for the state so and so, or state versus so and so. In Canada, it's our Regina versus so and so. The Queen is the state. The Queen is the embodiment of the concept of state of Canada. So when we talk about the true allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen, it's really true allegiance to the concept of Canada, the concept of statehood in the Canadian context. The Queen is the head of state, or was at the time of this oath, not anymore. But that is it's the oath of allegiance. So if Americans are listening, yes, the thing you said every day in class of every day of your life, when you started the day, that is what this individual who was required to do this, to become a lawyer, an officer of the court in the province of Alberta. And I guess it really raises questions and concerns for me, not in kind of a xenophobic way, but I don't know if this gentleman was born in Canada or an immigrant to Canada, but if he was an
So
immigrant,
he's actually born in Edmonton.
So he was born in, okay, so he's a Canadian born. That does
Yep.
change things somewhat. I think that if you choose to come to a country and you want to become a citizen of that country, for example, that you make a choice, that you are choosing to pledge your allegiance as a citizen of that sovereign country, whatever country that may be. And I think that, to suggest, well, yeah, I want to become a citizen, but I'm not going to pledge allegiance. I'm not going to have, the responsibilities that go along with the rights of citizenship, because to my mind, all rights bear concomitant responsibility, and the responsibilities are borne out in the oath. So similarly, with a officer of the court, a who is licensed in the practice of law in that province, to say that I am not going to be pledge allegiance to the state in the sense of allegiance to the laws of the state, that I am not going to be bound by those laws, that's a little problematic. And if your religion requires that, is that, where does that end? Like what if your religion, I don't know, if you had a religious belief something else, and you didn't have to follow the law, or you could take, if your religious belief said it's okay to take false affidavits, could you do that? Would that be a defense?
Well, I think that's part of the fascination or the fascinating facts of this case, right? In terms of, first I'm going to back up and talk about that oath of allegiance. Although that oath of allegiance appears to be to the monarch, that is not the way that oath of allegiance is interpreted. It's
And I
actually
think rightly so in the Canadian context.
right. It's interpreted as being an oath to the abstract ideal of the rule of law, that you are going to uphold the rule of law. And you mentioned it in terms of, if I become a citizen to Canada by immigrating to the country, that's very similar language to the citizenship oath of allegiance.
Absolutely.
And there are cases that have interpreted that oath of allegiance that it is to the rule of law, that you're going to uphold the rule of law, which is exactly what we do as lawyers every day. And it's the rule of law is the supreme law of the land, according to the Canadian Charter, as I recollect.
Well, it's curious to me, because it's like, it's a distinction without a difference. Because if in fact, I mean, a license to practice law is exactly that, and we all hear about people being disbarred. It means that their license is revoked. It's a license. It's not a right. It is a privilege to a certain extent to practice law that can be revoked. So if you break the law, right? If you don't uphold the rule of law, if you subvert the law, your license will be revoked. So isn't the very act of becoming a lawyer a promise to uphold the rule of law? Because if you don't uphold the rule of law, you're not a lawyer.
Well, and in Alberta, so this oath is one of 3 oaths that a lawyer needs to take to be admitted to the Law Society of Alberta. And, those other 2 oaths are basically, faithfully carrying out my duties as a lawyer. That's the language. And what was troublesome to the Court of Appeal was that it basically says, faithfully and bear true allegiance. And for the applicant, the lawyer in this case, his oath to his religion, and he was a member of the Khalsa community in Alberta.
And I think we should just sort of parenthetically insert here, nobody's questioning the bona fides of this gentleman's beliefs.
100%.
And that he truly held these beliefs, and that this was a truly true religious conviction. It is problematic because, true religious convictions are absolutely protected by the charter and by, all concepts of any liberal Western democracy protects the freedom of religion and the freedom to exercise and hold the beliefs that you hold true. And there's no doubt that this gentleman did hold them true and did very much believe that he was constrained from granting this oath, from giving this oath by his true and deeply held religious beliefs.
Right, right. And so his religious belief was a very, I guess, a strict form of Sikhism.
Right.
And, you talk about his sincere beliefs, and that's actually one of the tests, right? Freedom of religion, in order to be successful, to uphold that there's a breach of the charter right, that your freedom of conscience and religion is being infringed by a act of the state. That's the first test. Do you sincerely believe in the practice, and does that have a nexus with your religion?
Now, nobody challenged that.
Right.
The crown, the province never challenged the legitimacy of his religious beliefs.
Correct. And so then the second part of the test is whether the state conduct, the requirement of the oath, interferes in a non-trivial way with the lawyer's ability to act in accordance with his practice of and belief. And so, interestingly enough, at first instance, the court disagreed with his argument that his rights under the charter were breached. And the reason for that, Gavin, was that the chambers judge who heard the application made a factual error and believed that the lawyer's religious belief permitted him to take that oath of allegiance. But that was not what the evidence was. And interestingly enough, his evidence was also that the oath of allegiance basically required him to make a choice between taking the oath and practicing law in Alberta or uprooting his family from his community to go to another province to practice law. Now, at the end of the day, that's indeed what he did. He became a member of the Saskatchewan Bar, and under Alberta legislation, he was able to transfer that membership without taking the oath of allegiance to become a member of the Law Society of Alberta. I find that that's fascinating too.
I think that is fascinating. So in other words, if I transfer, so that I do think that is a bit of a chink in the armor, if you will, of Alberta, because if there's a back door and they let extra provincial lawyers become lawyers in Alberta without taking the oath, then why are they requiring, homegrown lawyers to take the oath? Either you have to take the oath to be a lawyer in Alberta or you don't. And I don't think there should be sort of two paths, and one with an oath and one without.
Right. And we've seen this in a number of charter cases now. We've seen it in Ontario. I find it fascinating that the government of Alberta didn't lead evidence. Right? They didn't cross-examine the lawyer's expert with respect to his religious practices. And you alluded to that at the start. How can a religion prevent someone from upholding the values of the rule of law?
Well, hang on a minute. Depends on what law is ruling. There are many religious beliefs that have legal principles and tenets very, very different than Western democratic kind of legal principles and tenets. And if you are saying that you are upholding the rule of this law, i.e. Western law, then I can think of some religions that might find that offensive, in the sense that I can't swear to uphold this type of law which conflicts with the law of my religious belief system. right?
Yeah, but from my standpoint, my view, does that potentially erode or cause problems to your society in terms of like
Oh,
what laws are you
100%.
upholding?
100%. I mean, think of an absurd example. It was with the there was a sect of Mormonism. I think it was in British Columbia, and they're polygamists, right? So which is illegal. Um, could so could the polygamist become a lawyer if he had to agree to uphold the rule of the Canadian law that says what he's doing is illegal? But his religious beliefs, look, I'm not going to question what somebody says they believe. He says he believes it. Um,
But
permitted, in fact, encouraged him to have more than one wife.
so I think that's kind of an extreme example. But
It is.
uh, 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 but Alberta didn't put forth any evidence
No, because
to uphold this.
this was a hot tomato.
Of course, it's a hot potato.
Yeah, or tomato. I said.
Potato, tomato.
Hot tomatoes are way messier than hot potatoes.
Well, you're Irish,
and they stain your shirt. just ask anyone about pasta sauce, and it's a lot worse than a potato. So
it must be your background that it's a hot tomato, but I call it a hot potato.
It could be either way. It's super hot. It was a buttered potato. They weren't going to go anywhere near this. Was kryptonite. No one was going to start attacking the religious beliefs of a very widely accepted belief system, which has extremely engaged followers and and a very identifiable group, the Sikh community. There's no chance politically that any government was going to take that on in Canada to be seen to be attacking, devout Sikhs. No more than I think they would attack any a devout group of any large, recognized religion.
No, of a recognized religion for sure.
But I mean, right? I think your point is well taken in the sense of, okay, that's fine and dandy in this instance, but I mean, does it not open the door to say that the rules apply except if your religion says they don't? And I mean, what rules do we change? What rules are malleable around that? And if the rule of law is supreme, then wait a minute, how can it be trumped by religious belief? If it's supreme, it's supreme. Can't be trumped by anything. If it's trumped by, oh well, my religion says that that's not acceptable. I mean, I think I'll give you an example, and this is a silly example, but I recall this vividly. When I was in public school, there was a kid in my class, nice kid, but he's a Jehovah's Witness, and he wasn't allowed to stand for the national anthem.
They would go out into the hallway.
Yeah, he used to go in the hallway. We all thought it was really strange. You wouldn't stand up for the national anthem. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, now I don't even know if they even play the national anthem anymore in classrooms, if they do or they don't. But that was an example of he couldn't stand up for the national anthem. That was against his religious beliefs. I mean, it was sort of like, that didn't make a lot of sense to me when I was 8 years old. But I still don't really understand that why standing for the national anthem would offend anyone's religious beliefs, because I think that my religious beliefs would be that there's no conflict between your loyalty and to your country and your religion. But I suppose some people have different views.
I guess certain religions don't recognize statehood, right? And so that's why you wouldn't stand up for a national anthem, because it's a symbol of a state.
No, but I mean, it's a very similar proposition here to say that I won't take an oath, because I mean, that is very, so there it is in the context of a very Western religious belief system, well recognized. Jehovah's Witnesses are very well recognized. I'm assuming, and I hope I don't offend anyone in the Jehovah's Witness community with this, that's still the tenet of that faith. I mean, I just know from, this is purely anecdotal, from a kid I remember from public school.
Right.
But, that to me is a similar instance of a national convention or something that everyone was required to do. I mean, we were certainly required to stand up for the national anthem when I was in public school, except for this kid who wasn't required to. He was excused because of his
Yeah.
religious beliefs.
So, one thing that I think we do want to talk about, and why I find it fascinating, and you've given, I think, Gavin, a great explanation as to why the province of Alberta didn't lead evidence. But in any charter challenge, it is the obligation of the government to lead evidence where a court finds a charter breach, right? So a breach of a charter, a breach of a right under the charter, the government can defend that and under Section 1, but they are required to lead evidence. They're required to show that there's a pressing and substantial concern that's linked to the legislation that's under attack, that it doesn't minimally impair somebody's right, and that there's a weighing exercise at the end of the day.
I think the extra provincial backdoor was the death of their charter defense. I think the fact that they allowed people to become lawyers in the province of Alberta without taking an oath through this extra provincial route was almost, fatal to my mind, to their being able to maintain that for homegrown lawyers.
I agree. Well, I'm actually quite surprised that this ended up in court and actually had to go to the Court of Appeal.
He lost the first two times.
Well, he lost the first time.
Yeah.
Only because the evidence was misinterpreted by the Chambers judge.
Well, the evidence. I mean, it's interesting because it was the evidence on what the edicts of the individual religion were. And my recollection is that the application of first instance was that the judge of first instance said, yeah, okay, fine, but he's not prohibited from pledging allegiance to an abstract concept.
Right.
And the Queen in the context of the Canadian state is an abstract concept. It's not, I'm pledging allegiance to her as a person. And that was
right.
I guess that was the error, because the edicts of the religion prevented the pledging of allegiance to an abstract concept, and he just got it wrong.
Regardless, if he could have done through the back door what he couldn't do through the front door, and that was okay,
isn't that the end of it?
Why would you go through that exercise and actually defend his application?
It's an interesting question.
And I mean, Gavin, in Ontario,
well, why not just change the rules?
Right,
make the oath optional.
Which is what the rule is in Ontario. You don't have to take the oath of allegiance to be a lawyer.
Right.
Other provinces have actually eliminated the oath.
Right. I do think that the concept of becoming a lawyer in and of itself, the act of becoming a member of the bar, the act of becoming a licensee with the ability to have your license revoked if you do not uphold the rule of law, is by far and away a far more meaningful attestation of your allegiance to the rule of law than just raising your hand and mouthing some words. And I mean, my commendations to this individual, that, because there's plenty of people that would just go, well, what the heck? I don't care. I'll cross my fingers when I do it. I'll go through the motion and whatever. I don't mean it. And he clearly took this extremely seriously enough that he was prepared to put his life on a path to go to another province, become a lawyer, and come back again, rather than just pretending, crossing your fingers and your toes and raising your hand and mouthing the words, which is what most people, frankly, would have done.
And what I find actually interesting is the Alberta Court of Appeal, in its judgment, basically almost distinguishes the oath of allegiance that you take as a citizen from the one that he was required to take as a lawyer.
That's interesting to me, because why is that? I mean, I get it. I think there is a distinction.
Should there be a difference?
Yeah, I think there is a difference, because I think that he's a natural born Canadian. He's not choosing to be a Canadian. He's a Canadian. I mean, it's not, if you immigrate to Canada, I do think that it's different. I think that if you're a natural born Canadian, it's where you're born. this is your country by birth. That is by fate, or act of God, whatever you want to believe it. This is where you're from. But if you choose to come to a country, if I choose to immigrate to, I don't know, Australia, that's a choice, and I make that choice, and I have to therefore, with that choice, I want the rights that go with citizenship of a foreign country. I have to have the responsibilities that go with the citizenship of a foreign country. If they're going to give me citizenship, I give them my allegiance in return. It's a bargain, to my mind.
I don't disagree with you from that perspective, and we do have Canadian cases that have actually upheld the oath of allegiance for citizenship. I don't know what other professional bodies require an oath of allegiance, but I think this is a precedent-setting case to those bodies that maybe they need to review what their requirements are.
I don't know. What is engineers are going to pledge allegiance to the laws of physics? I mean, like, it's a little different when you're a lawyer.
I don't know.
A lawyer in the rule of law.
Paralegals.
Paralegals. Okay. Well, they're licensees. Like that is I would have thought that if they're going to license paralegals, which they do, and they're licensees, that with that's the exchange. With the privilege of the license comes the responsibility that goes along with it. But I think that just getting the license is basically signifying your agreement to abide by the rules and to uphold the rule of law. I don't think you need to hold your hand up and mouth it to make it any more meaningful. That's just, to my mind, in terms of what the nature of the engagement is. And citizenship, though, is a fundamentally different thing, I think, to some extent. A very fundamentally different thing.
And the Alberta Court of Appeal would agree with you.
Yeah, well,
in that regard.
Sometimes they get it right.
As long as they're not tripping while they're writing their judgment and hyperextending their thumbs.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Just don't be walking up the stairs and juggling at the same time. Anyway, Stephen, always a very interesting discussion. A great case. A very interesting concept of what it means to be a Canadian and what it means to be a Canadian lawyer, and how I think the Canadian, what it is to be a Canadian is such a expansive thing, and how it's able to embrace different faiths and cultures. I think is a good thing at the end of the piece. Mm-hmm. And I think that the rule of law is alive and well in Canada, and I'm pleased to see, frankly, that the Court of Appeal took the route it did. And I think that some things, I'm a big fan of tradition and history, but sometimes tradition and history need to give way a little bit too, and we need to grow and modernize in some aspects of it, while never losing sight of where we came from and the roots of this country in the great traditions and legal traditions, particularly, that it has. Anyways, that brings us to the end of another wonderful episode. Thanks again. Thanks to all our listeners. Thanks to our producer, Doug Downs. As always, a terrific job. And always remember, if no one is above the law, everyone is beneath it.